It is Fed decision day, believe it or not. The central bank widely expected to leave rates unchanged. It is, though, expected to be Chairman Jay Powell's last news conference, and that's why more people will be paying attention to this than normal. Joining us right now is David Rubenstein. He is the co-founder and co-chairman of the Carlyle Group. And David, let's first of all, welcome. It's good to see you.
My pleasure.
Let's talk a little bit about what we might expect today. Again, this might not be something that too many people were interested in because they're not going to do anything with rates. We expect them to leave it unchanged. But we don't know exactly what Chairman Powell is going to say at his last meeting or if he'll be stepping down from the Fed or decide to stay on a little longer. And that might be the biggest reason people will be paying attention. What do you expect to hear? What's your anticipation here?
I don't have any inside information, but I'll give you my guess. After the press conference today, that will be the 65th press conference that Jay Powell has had. And so he's revolutionized the way Fed chairs communicate with the public. Historically, Fed chairs did not talk after FOMC meetings. Alan Greenspan never had a press conference after an FOMC meeting, and nor did Paul Volcker. And so you had to guess a little bit about what the Fed was doing. Jay Powell has brought transparency to the Fed, and I think that's a good thing. He's obviously had to struggle with the President of the United States criticizing him for many years, but he's overcome that, in my view. Today, I don't expect that the Fed is going to have any rate cuts. During Jay Powell's tenure as Fed chair, he's had 15 rate increases and 12 rate decreases. So more or less about even. But what he had to deal with was one of the hardest problems any Fed chair's ever had. When he became Fed chair, not long thereafter, we went into COVID. And as a result, the Trump administration and the Biden administration injected about $5 trillion into the economy with no corresponding tax increases. That obviously produced inflation, which went as high as 9%. Jay Powell had to engineer a situation where we did not go into a recession, but also had to deal with high inflation. And fortunately, we did not really go into a real recession. There was a technical recession, but generally we didn't have a recession during his 8 1/3 years as Fed chair. So I think he deserves credit for engineering that and for being transparent and also for not, I would say, getting into a fight with President Trump. Obviously, many of us would probably say it's difficult to have a president of the United States criticize you and not respond. But I think he basically did not respond to that and bit his tongue for most of the time he was Fed chair. So on the whole, I think the country owes him a lot of gratitude for doing a good job in engineering the post-COVID inflationary situation in the United States.
David, I guess just on the other side, I'd say I just keep coming back to, and I know that there's different ways, different people to blame for the inflation. And the $5 trillion, I think, a lot of it was not necessary. The last $3.5 trillion, which came later in the Biden administration. But as a result of those 40-year highs in inflation, real wages dropped during that 4-year period when Biden was president. The other thing, the balance sheet expansion that we saw from that, a lot of people would say that was very good for people that owned assets. And you can see what happened to the owners of things when you expand the balance sheet like that and dump so much money. We've got the worst income inequality in the history of the world. A lot of people say that that's totally due to the profligacy, is another word, of the Fed, which enabled Congress to overspend as well. So, I mean, there's plenty of negatives that I can find. No one wants to have less wages in a 4-year period than when they began, David.
I agree, but what would you like to do if you had been the Fed chair and you saw COVID coming in and the government of the United States is spending $5 trillion? What would you do to respond to that?
Well, the critique would be they responded too late.
In terms of raising rates.
In terms of rate. And they were involved in all kinds of climate change. They were involved in all kinds of things, but never once, weighed in on all the money that was being spent on all the infrastructure.
Although, Joe, I will say at the time,
Green New Deal, and all that.
You defended Powell a lot of the way.
I'm just saying that I'm just playing devil's advocate.
The Fed chairman does not decide what Congress does or the administration. Remember, the Fed chairman is the chairman of the FOMC. He doesn't make all these decisions by himself. And so you have a lot of people on the Fed FOMC making these decisions. These weren't narrowly decided. They were generally unanimous.
Yeah. It's always easy to go back and criticize and critique. But the biggest issue he's going to have to, and by the way, I'm a fan of what Chairman Powell did over this time, too. But the biggest critique is always going to be waiting so long to deal with that inflation, thinking that it was going to be transitory. That's a phrase you don't forget.
I think Janet Yellen and Jay Powell both said in March of 2021 that the inflation that was high then, peaked at 8 to 9%, was transitory. Later, they admitted that was probably not the best word. I think that was probably something they would all regret. It wasn't transitory. It turned out to be more enduring. However, they did do something about it. And the result is that our economy went pretty well. We did not have a real recession during that 8-year period of time. Jay Powell has been, I think, the 4th or 5th longest serving Fed chair and never had a recession during his period of time. So I think he deserves some credit for that. And I think dealing with the problems he had at the White House was not easy to deal with either. So on the whole, I would give him pretty high marks. I'd say no Fed chairman is perfect, but I think he did a pretty good job, and he bit his tongue for much of the time. And I think all of us would have had a tough time biting our tongue if you're going criticized daily by the President of the United States.